In the annals of the Ottoman Empire, few figures have left as lasting a mark as the Janissaries. Far more than mere soldiers, they were the empire's sharp edge, forged in the silence of obedience and then unleashed with terrifying precision. For centuries, the Janissaries moved across the Ottoman world like a shadowy tide, unquestioned, rarely challenged, and often uncontrollable. They reshaped cities, deposed rulers, and wandered the halls of palaces with a presence that inspired equal parts admiration and fear. Their story is not just part of Ottoman history, it is a legacy of power, fear, and transformation etched deep within the bones of civilization. The Devshirme system, forced recruitment of children. The creation of this elite force did not begin on the battlefield, but in the quiet corners of Christian villages in the Balkans. Here, children were taken not by invaders in the night, but by royal decree. This system, known as Devshirme or collection, became the lifeblood of the Janissary Corps. It was a precise, institutionalized form of power through which Christian families under Ottoman rule were required to deliver their sons, typically between the ages of 8 and 18, to the Sultan. Once taken, these children were converted to Islam and subjected to years of intense training. Every aspect of their previous identity was stripped away not through chaos, but through methodical indoctrination. They were trained not only to fight, but to serve. Chosen for their intelligence, strength, and obedience, they were taught Turkish, trained in military discipline, and immersed in a strict code of loyalty to the Sultan. This was no mere military academy, it was a machine designed to erase the self and build an elite force. As 17th century historian Dmitry Cantemir observed, the great lord has no more faithful slaves than those he has taken from their own parents. What started as forced recruitment eventually became a pathway to extraordinary power. Many of these boys rose through the ranks to command armies, govern provinces, and whisper in the ears of emperors. Yet their origins were never forgotten by the empire or by those who lived under its shadow. The Devshirme system was more than policy. It was a calculated restructuring of society, a silent conquest that required no sword. And it left generations of individuals trapped between two worlds, belonging to both yet, at the same time, to neither. Elite warriors turned kingsmakers. At the height of their power, the Janissaries were not merely the Sultan's personal guard. They were the backbone of the Ottoman war machine. Trained to march without fear, shoot without hesitation, and die without question, they were feared across continents. But as their power grew, so did their ambitions. The very force that was created to uphold imperial dominance began to reshape it from within. Originally forbidden to marry, own property, or engage in trade, the Janissaries were expected to live solely for the state. But by the late 16th century, these restrictions began to loosen. With their immense influence in military campaigns and urban life, they became deeply entrenched in the heart of Ottoman society. Wealth flowed into their ranks. Families began bribing officials to place their sons into what was once a forced recruitment system. The Janissary became not just a soldier, but a status symbol. Over time, their influence spread beyond the battlefield to the very corridors of power. They influenced appointments to high offices, dictated terms of succession, and even intervened in foreign politics. When the Janissaries rose up, they did so not with chaotic fury, but with terrifying precision. These were not random revolts. They were calculated displays of strength, aimed directly at the heart of Ottoman authority. Over time, they became a defining threat within the empire, as dangerous as any external enemy. From the 17th century onward, Janissary uprisings became alarmingly frequent. What had once been an elite military force became an open challenger to the very rulers they had sworn to protect. In 1622, their fury culminated in one of the most shocking moments in Ottoman history, the deposition of Sultan Osman II, known as Osman the Young. He attempted to curb their growing influence by creating a rival army. The Janissaries responded not with negotiation, but with insurrection. The palace was invaded, and the Sultan was imprisoned, never to leave his cell alive. But it was in 1656 when discontent reached its darkest and most surreal climax. Vaka-i Vakvaki, the event of the Vakvik tree. Frustrated by mismanagement, inflation, and the continued abuse of Janissary power, the people of Istanbul and elements of the military took a dangerous turn. A list of officials accused of corruption, failure, or betrayal of public trust was nailed to a tree in the capital. One by one, these individuals were hunted down. Their bodies hung from the branches of the tree in a macabre parody of justice meant to resonate through the palace walls. This gruesome event was more than just a riot, it was a reckoning. The symbolism was unmistakable. The state had lost control not only of its soldiers but of its soul. The Vakvak tree, named after a mythical tree that bore the heads of the condemned, became a real emblem of rebellion and a bloodied government. The empire survived the chaos, but the wound festered. The Janissaries had once again proven that they could shake the foundations of power, not by defending the state, but by bending it to their will. Silent executions within the palace walls, not all the battles within the Ottoman Empire were fought on battlefields or in open rebellions. Some of the most decisive shifts in power took place behind the high walls of the Topkapi Palace, silent, calculated, and almost completely invisible to the public eye. In this shadowy world, the Janissaries were not just executors of imperial will, they were instruments in the careful elimination of those who stood in their way. As political tensions deepened, sultans and viziers increasingly relied on the Janissaries to carry out covert eliminations. High-ranking officials who fell from favor could disappear overnight, their names erased from records, their legacies wiped out with chilling efficiency. These were not chaotic purges, but cold operations sanctioned by decree and executed without fanfare. Bound by their oath to the Sultan but influenced by factional struggles, the Janissaries became tools in a dangerous game of internal control. They ensured that any dissent, real or perceived, was dealt with swiftly. But loyalty within the palace was never absolute. Sometimes, the Janissaries went from being instruments of justice to agents of ambition, aligning with rival factions or acting on their own interests to maintain their influence. The role of the Janissaries in the fall of sultans, their power to install or depose sultans, was not theoretical. It was practiced, deliberate, and devastatingly real. Sultan Osman II's death in 1622, after attempting to curb their autonomy, set a chilling precedent, a silent message for all future rulers. Reform, if it touched the Janissaries, would not be tolerated. In 1807, this pattern repeated with Sultan Selim III. Known for his progressive reforms, Selim sought to modernize the military through the Nizam-i-Seded, or New Order. But the Janissaries saw this as a direct threat to their power. They rebelled, deposed him, and ensured his death, replacing him with a more pliable ruler, Mustafa IV. These were not mere coups, they were redefinitions of power. When a military elite can dethrone the monarch they swore to protect, the empire's hierarchy is inverted. The Sultan may wear the crown, but it was the Janissaries who held the weight behind it. Conclusion: a transformative force, the Janissaries were more than an elite military corps. They were a transformative force that reshaped the Ottoman Empire from within. Born out of coercion, they came to command armies, dethrone sultans, and dictate imperial policies. Their legacy is one of brilliance and danger, where discipline gave way to domination. In the end, we must ask, when power is built on loyalty, what happens when that loyalty turns inward? As Katib Kelebi wrote in Mizanul Haq, a state built on oppression will end in ruin. The Janissaries proved that, in the end, loyalty to the state could become the very thing that destroys it.